Welcome, everybody. Today, we are here for the Community Impact Spotlight. This is a special edition. Last week, we featured the Soul Sisters who spoke to us about the concerns in our community for mental health, illness, and COVID 19's impact on our mental health. So today, we bring to you the Soul Brothers. We have Dr. Robert Patterson, Dr. William Hicks, and Dr. David Hampton. Today's show has a special guest host, and that is our very own Dr. Ivan Douglas Hicks. Enjoy the show.
Good day, and thank you for joining us for this special edition of Community Impact Spotlight. I'm excited today that we have three wonderful men with us on today, and we want to talk specifically about men's health. We want to talk about body, mind, and soul. Last week, we were able to talk with some soul sisters. We were able to talk with these soul sisters about mental health specifically. But today we wanted to broaden the conversation a little bit. And so as opposed to soul sisters talking about mental health, I've got my soul brothers here. And we're appreciative that we can talk not just about mental health, but we can talk about physical health and we can talk about spiritual health as well. With us on today, we have Dr. Robert Patterson. Dr. Robert Patterson is a psychiatrist with Eskenazi Health. And he is also a member of First Baptist Church, North Indianapolis. And though we have been separated because we have not been in the sanctuary since way back in the day, this gives us an opportunity to reconnect. And I'm appreciative that he has come to share with us on today to talk specifically about health and specifically about mental health as well. We have my cousin William James Hicks. I call him BJ. You all can call him Dr. Hicks. He is a neurologist. He is in Columbus, Ohio, a proud graduate of Morehouse College. I'll throw that in there. Right. And he is certainly well able to talk to us about neurology and talk to us about the physical body during this time. Then my good friend, Dr. David Hampton. David Hampton is my brother, and he is the deputy mayor of the city of Indianapolis. The deputy mayor for neighborhoods. He is also a preacher par excellence. And we have the opportunity to hear a spiritual perspective and from one that works day in and day out with our community to ensure that we have the holistic health that's necessary for us to grow to what God has called us to be. And so I'm appreciative once again for each of you all being here on today. And I want to give each of you an opportunity to talk. I want to give you all an opportunity to talk individually to begin with, but we want to have just a real discussion. We want to have a discussion among brothers on today about the health needs and specifically about the health needs of our community in the midst of COVID-19. Intra-corona, I call it. We are in the midst of trying to adapt and show the necessary agility to make it through this time. And so as we come on today, maybe in our respective areas for the mind and for the soul and for the body, what are some of the definitive impacts that are taking place and how, in a general sense, can we make sure that we remain healthy? I want to start, first of all, with Dr. Robert Patterson.
Well, thank you. First, I want to thank you for inviting me to have the opportunity to come in here.
And please introduce yourself a little bit better than I did.
My name's Robert Patterson. I'm a physician, staff psychiatrist with Eskenazi Health, working in outpatient practice, involved in primarily in adult addictions, but I really do basically anything with reference to psychiatry, with the exception of children. So anything maybe 16 and older, if there's something going on or you're having some level of difficulty, certainly on an outpatient perspective, I could be involved in your care. I'm also involved in working in emergency psychiatric care as well as inpatient care when I'm needed by the organization. So that's pretty much my background. But your question was with reference to COVID and the various stresses that we could see undergoing. I guess pandemics are new to us. I mean, we haven't had a pandemic since 1918. So in terms of dealing with this, we really have very little reference to go from. What we do know is that there certainly is a lot of fear and worry, particularly around your individual health and your loved ones. I have an elderly father who I'm very concerned about. And so, people wearing masks are very important to me because I don't want it to get back to him somehow. But there's also the issue of self-isolation. In order to do what we need to do and to protect ourselves, we're going to have to self-isolate to a certain degree. We're going to have to keep our distance. We can't go out and gather in the ways that we normally would gather. And these are ways that, people who are even functioning well from a mental health perspective, they need to kind of keep themselves going. And then when you throw in the aspect of someone who's had some difficulties in the past or is currently undergoing difficulties with mental health, this situation of self-isolation certainly can be devastating. And I've seen that quite a bit in my patient practice as well at this point in time. We see difficulties in sleep patterns, changes in sleep patterns, changes in their difficulty or their inability to be able to focus. You're also seeing difficulties in their areas of go-to, say, drugs and alcohol. So those things that they may have just done in moderation, they're doing those to a greater extent. So all of these factors, the stress, the worry, the self-isolation, the increase in substance use, these things are pretty difficult, and they make it pretty difficult for people in these times.
Absolutely. We're living in tough times. And when we think about the effect on our minds, when we think about the emotional stressors that were already in place for a number of people, and within the community that we all serve, certainly there are predeterminants of health and even mental health and stressors that are exponentially worse. And so it's important for us to have dialogue and discussion like this. I want to ask William James Hicks from Columbus, Ohio. I'm going to ask that he might introduce himself a little bit more, and that he might talk to us about neurology and talk to us about the physical aspects and effects, the impact of COVID-19.
Thank you, Reverend Ivan, my dear cousin. I really appreciate the time, and I wouldn't, I wouldn't have it any other way being here with y'all brothers. This is a heavy group, and I'm glad I could bring my perspective from a neighboring state. But a little bit about myself, like Ivan said, I went to Morehouse College. After that, I went to Howard University for medical school. I did neurology training in Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit. Went down to Houston, Texas for a stroke fellowship, and that's really what my focus is in cerebral vascular neurology or stroke neurology. So that's really where my passion lies, and in all things stroke and stroke-related conditions. Here in Columbus, there's a hospital affiliated with a health system called Ohio Health, and the large comprehensive stroke center I'm the co-director of here in town. I'm also the physician lead for what we call the Mobile Stroke Treatment Unit, which is a ambulance which is dedicated solely to stroke care I believe there's one in Indianapolis as well, affiliated with IU, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I believe that's the case. I don't know how it's going, but so that's a big part of my focus, which is bringing cutting edge stroke care directly to patients, often patients that look like us who may not be well versed in healthcare and getting the type of healthcare that keeps you, quite frankly, away from stroke hospitals and stroke care. So that's, but we're still delivering the type of care that leaves patients, giving patients the ability to leave the hospital walking out instead of being taken to a nursing home or even worse. Mm-hmm. So for stroke care, that's really what my focus is these days. I'm also the immediate past president of the Columbus American Heart, American Stroke Association, as well as I'm a board member for the Midwest American Heart, American Stroke Association board of directors as well. Now, regarding this time, I mean, we all know that every aspect of our lives as human beings have been affected in ways that we are just now starting to unpack. And I think a lot of we can dive into each individual aspect of that and really have an hour's worth of conversation. But we're here in the Midwest, and it's getting colder. And in addition to this being the time when we gather as a community, as we gather as family, as friends, and Thanksgiving and Christmas, this is the time when, it's really when we showcase the best of ourselves as Americans and as Black folk and as church folk. And to have the COVID spike occur at this point in time, and to have it at this point in time, the way the virus works and the way the virus is most lethal is in indoor gatherings, and when there's not a lot of air circulating, and that corresponding directly with this being a cold time of year when people have to stay at home just because of the weather. So having these two things coming directly in contact with each other, knowing that we've had months and months and months of pandemic life that is affecting us in various different ways, there's just so much that we can discuss. But one thing that, since I do a lot of work with emergency care and hospital care, we have noticed that people that may have had medical diagnoses, may have gone to doctors and medical professionals for a lot of, these pre-existing conditions that we hear a lot about that predispose people to worse outcomes with COVID. Now, because of everybody's fear about going out and kind of interacting, and maybe also due in part with what we saw in the beginning as far as the news coverage in the spring about the devastation that hit hospitals and just all the morbidity and mortality that we saw, the death and everything. There is a sometimes unconscious backlash to avoid hospitals and to avoid medical care by saying, I don't want to be anywhere near that. That's where people go to die. That's where people go to get tubes in their mouth. And even though it's just going for my routine checkup, maybe I'm going to sit this one out. And that, unfortunately, has led to people not catching up with their healthcare, and people maybe not following up with the medications that they were prescribed previously, or if they needed to establish care, they deferred it because, again, maybe life's getting in the way, quite frankly. So all of these things are coming together. And then we're also noticing that the numbers of patients coming in with conditions like heart attack, stroke, and other serious issues that are very, very time dependent. We have noticed this year a bit of a dip as far as the numbers of people coming in. And we would love to say that that's because everyone is listening to, their church home and their friends and their family, and they're getting active and they're doing more exercise at home and these sorts of things. But I think we know that this is likely because people are just avoiding the hospitals, and they're having heart attacks, they're having strokes, they're having serious medical episodes that they try to tough their way through at home. And that's really something that a passion of mine through all of this is to really let people know that hospitals, healthcare providers, even during the rise that we've noticed, these are often the places where you're most safe because everyone's abiding by very strict protocols. And my hospital is no exception. And I'm sure the healthcare systems in Indianapolis are no exception as well. So that's just one thing that I really want to convey to everybody. Not only checking in with your healthcare providers of all types, because they're ready for you. They've been COVID ready for several months. And within the guidelines that the city, Dr. Hampton will probably talk about that maybe a little bit, but within your individual cities, however that the healthcare is allowed to be practiced, they're going to be COVID appropriate and COVID ready to serve those in need.
Thank you. And, I look from my perspective, from my seat. I pastor First Baptist Church, North Indianapolis, and we are an elderly, a graying congregation at least. And for a couple of months, I had to brave and perform one funeral a week for a stint there. And the members have been expiring and their friends and family have been affected. The call for pastoral care has increased because of the physical nature of COVID-19. At the same time, if I am the prophetic prognosticator, if I'm able to look forward the way I sometimes say I can, then I have to see the effect of COVID-19 on mental health and show agility and reposition even First Baptist Church, North Indianapolis in an urban environment. Certainly we do major community initiatives. We vanguard the causes of widows and children. We fight for those that can't easily fight for themselves. We do what Matthew 25 says. We feed those that are hungry, clothe those that are naked. We visit those that are sick and in prison. But even visitations are different now. Funerals are different now. Going to the hospital, there are restrictions to how many people can come in. And so during this time of separation as well, we have sought to retrain and retool missionaries to make sure people aren't isolated during this time of separation. And so for the physical aspects that we have to deal with, we are now seeking to deal more so with the emotional and the mental effects of COVID-19 and seeking really through what we did last week, dealing with mental health and Soul Sisters with mental health. And even this week, to really look to see how we can continue to provide Rhema ministry, Right Now ministry for the community that is going to be even more so devastated as what we're seeing right now is an increase. And maybe it's a mushroom and it will go away, but maybe it will keep on going up and down like it's doing right now. We're hopeful for a vaccine, but even in that time, it is important for us to continue to stay diligent and seek the direction of God in the midst of what we're going through. And so we certainly want to hear from Dr. David Hampton, our deputy mayor here in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I'm going to let him introduce himself a little bit more as well and let us know in terms of spiritual life, how are we being affected and how can we look forward to, even greater ministry and greater impact that we can have in this time.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hicks. It's an honor to be included with these other great doctors, actual medical doctors. I'm a doctor of ministry, so I can speak to the issue of our spiritual health in these times. Of course, I was a pastor for 20 years, and God used me in a major way and opened up a door for me to continue ministry as a deputy mayor, ministry to the city in another capacity. My role includes connecting neighborhoods to key city services, and I oversee a few city agencies and departments. But I think the bulk of my work and the core of my work is really ministering to our people and our community. And in this time of COVID, both doctors have already spoken so eloquently about how we are coping, how we can cope. I agree with what Doc said in the beginning. This is the first time we've had to face a pandemic in our lifetime. At least in the last 100 years, we've not seen the likes of anything like this. And so it would certainly behoove us to think about the spiritual ramifications and the spiritual implications of what we're dealing with. In one instance, and I want to sort of put it in these terms, one of my mentors, Dr. Johnny Ray Youngblood, who pastors in Brooklyn, New York, I'll never forget what he shared with me one time. And he was having some physical issues with his heart, and he said that his cardiologist told him that when you don't eat right and when you don't take care of your body, your heart begins to attack you, literally. And that's what a heart attack is. It is your heart attacking you for you abusing it. And in many ways, that is exactly what the earth is doing. We have misused and abused God's earth for so long. In a real sense, it is attacking us. We saw over the summer, I think for the first time ever, 2 hurricanes, hit the southern coast. 2 hurricanes at the same time. We're seeing the types of social ills in ways we've never seen. The racial divide in our country. Even here in the city of Indianapolis, we're dealing with many social ills and issues of poverty and food insecurity. We just hit a crime or homicide rate of 200 plus homicides, and it's not the end of the year yet. Certainly, we can't blame that on the mayor or on city government, but I challenge us and those listening to think on a deeper level, to think about the spiritual implications of all that we're dealing with. The Bible already tells us in 2 Timothy chapter 3 that there will be perilous times. We're going to deal with perilous men and women, and that's what we see right now. We're seeing the perils of decades of sin catching up to us, but those of us who know Christ know that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and of power and of a sound mind. So in one sense, I want to encourage believers. This is a time where, yes, we're dealing with COVID, we're dealing with a global pandemic, but the Bible already told us we would deal with such things. And so I want to invite us to turn to our faith in these times. I know it's difficult as we talk about mental health, and certainly it's taken a toll on all of us. This is a new normal. We are meeting virtually. Those of us who are people persons and pastors, and we like to be around people, we can't even worship in ways that we used to. And in many ways, I think God is shifting us and challenging our faith, especially for the church, because we are challenged in ways that we've never had to be challenged before, but these are ways that we are familiar with. Let me give an example. And Pastor, you see this, and I saw this every Sunday. We gather to worship in the church house. Well, the church is not a building. So now our faith is being challenged in such a way that if your faith was tied to a building, then I think God is telling us that your faith needs to be tied only to Christ, and it's not limited to a time or space. So we're having to have church virtually. We have to social distance, but in the midst of social distancing, we don't have to be spiritually distant. Mm-hmm. And, again, as I refer back to some of the social ills we see, and let me go back to the homicide rate in the city, because, we hear about that all the time. But I don't want us to overlook that there are some deep spiritual implications around why we see crime on the rise. And it's certainly not just our city. It's every city around the nation and globe. I think we have hit a spiritual crossroads. I think that when we learn the basic spiritual disciplines of prayer number one is our greatest spiritual discipline. We can talk about being physically fit, eating right, exercising. Well, we have to do our spiritual exercise, and prayer is certainly chief among them. I've always liked to say that prayer is breathing. We have to talk to God, but it's our lifeline. Without prayer, we die of spiritual asphyxiation. Prayer ought to be as regular for us as breathing. We need it. It's a necessity. It's not an option. It builds our relationship with God. It actually builds our faith. And in these times, how can we make it without prayer? How do marriages last without prayer? How do relationships continue without prayer? How do we wake up in the morning every day and deal with the challenges on our jobs and the demands upon our time and the stresses of what COVID is doing to us daily, psychologically, physically, mentally? How do we cope without prayer? I know I can't do it. I need prayer. I need God every second, every minute, every hour. And not only with COVID, but I have to pray to God to deal with my own personal challenges daily. And so, again, I want to encourage everyone listening to not neglect your spiritual well-being. If you eat right, if you exercise, don't forget to exercise your spiritual body as well. We are made up of mind, body, and soul. And so we have to attend to our souls with just as much fervor, if not even the more so in the times in which we live. And yes, I do believe this is our new normal. We're going to have to get used to this. I don't know about you all. I know they talk about a vaccine, but being a Black man, I'm not going to be the first to take the vaccine. I would just tell y'all that right now. I don't trust it based on our history in this country and the Tuskegee experiments and all that's been done. I don't want to be the first to take a vaccine. But having said that, I do look forward to us getting to some sense of normalcy. But I wonder what that normalcy looks like, because for me, I'm going to continue to wear a mask from now on. I didn't wear one before COVID, but even when and if there's a vaccine, I'm going to continue to wear a mask just to take precautionary measures. And so as we adjust to these new normals, as we think about how we are affected in our worship, how we are affected on our jobs, how we are affected in just about every aspect of our lives, the spiritual is right at the center. And I do believe that in many ways, God is opening our eyes, allowing us to see some things. As Paul said, the scales have been wiped from our eyes and the covers are taken off. We obviously see the racial divide in this country. And unfortunately, segments of the Church of Jesus Christ have theologized that what is going on in Washington with this leader is okay. It's not okay. And to say that, yes, God ordains every leader, as Romans chapter 10 tells us, but God does not condone all of the behavior of every leader. And so I don't want Christians to be misled to think that the person who is there is doing anything spiritual or of the Bible or that is Christian, because we have seen just the opposite. We've seen a lot of division in our country. And I don't mean to just beat up on the president, but I do see that the church is also divided, because there are some who would subscribe to a faulty theology around a leader who they think just because he's pro-life or just because he's conservative, that doesn't translate to true Christian values. And we need to know the difference and to be able to decipher and to interpret the things we see in our society right now. Again, and you only know that when you read God's word, when you pray and attend to the spiritual disciplines that are so important. So, Dr. Hicks, thank you for having this discussion. And I'll stop right there.
Well, you know, I just want to say, you probably had a follow-up question, did you? Well, Dr. Hicks, I agree with, everything you said with reference to spirituality and how important it is. It's something that I try to work into my practice. I'm told not to, but I can't help it because it's something I believe in and something that I think quite a few of my patients, the majority of my patients, believe in. So tapping into that is, I think, really important to physical and mental health. And certainly I agree with you with reference to the political spectrum. I don't think we'd be in this position if we'd had a leader who took this more seriously. And I think I can speak from that from perspective of a physician, a provider, knowing the things that we needed to do in order to have protected ourselves and to be in a position to move forward. But I will say, as a physician, me and my family will be first in line to get the vaccine. I will volunteer. Anybody in my family who's willing to go with me. We will go to the very front of the line for the vaccine because that really is the only way we're going to get past this thing. I mean, this is a really deadly disease, and the possibility of it causing even more damage than it has done right now. It's going to continue to spread if no other type of intervention comes about. We can't live the rest of our lives with masks. I mean, I guess it would be an option if we couldn't come up with a vaccine. But given that it looks like we have one, and we have one that's not only safe, that has a really good efficacy rate, it certainly should be something that I think that we should encourage people in our community to take. Now, I say that also as someone, and Dr. Hicks knows this, who got corona. So I got COVID back in late March. And at that point in time, I'd say I was probably in the best health not the best health of my life. I mean, if I was 17 and 18, I was playing football, that was one thing. But I mean, I was in pretty good shape. I was lifting and running and working out every day. I was pretty happy with the way I looked and, was really close to some major goals that I'd set for myself when I came down with it. And I'm telling you, for 2 weeks, it was really touch and go. I didn't actually have to go to the hospital, but I spent a good 7 to 10 days really on my back. Couldn't really move, had very little energy. I lost 10 pounds in 5 days. I couldn't eat. I couldn't drink. It was the scariest time, I think, of my life. I mean, I haven't told anybody this. I don't think I've even told you this, Dr. Hicks, but, I was separating myself and I had isolated myself into the basement, and my wife had the baby monitor on me. So she was kind of watching me. I didn't even know that our baby monitor still worked because all our kids are older. She hooked it up. I didn't know she was watching me either, by the way, which I would have liked her if she'd let me know that. But anyway, she was watching on the baby monitor. And I felt so bad one night that I literally crawled upstairs into her bedroom. And I said, I don't feel like I'm going to make it. And I wasn't having breathing difficulty. I just felt that bad. It felt like gravity was tenfold. It was pulling me into the ground. It was a tiredness that I can't even describe. And I've had really bad flu before. So this thing is nothing to play with. Luckily, it broke after about 7 days. But even then, when I started to feel better, all of a sudden the breathing difficulties came in. And I don't know if I know certainly, Dr. Hicks, you've heard about it before, but there is this, you get better for a period of time and then something happens and you drop off again. And I'd read up so much about it that I was concerned that I was going to go through that phase of it. So for about 3 days, I had a lot of difficulty breathing. If I were talking to you guys like this, I would have had to stop and just catch my breath for about 30 seconds, walking up a short flight of stairs. And again, this is someone who, I have no health problems. I may be older, but I mean, in terms of working out and running, I was in good enough shape. I could have easily run a half marathon. And here it knocked me down. So this is a very serious illness. And we've got to do everything we can to make sure that everybody in our, well, everybody in general, but certainly people in our community understand that we've got to do whatever is necessary to get us in a position where we can move forward with our health, and that we will not be in a position where we can affect the health negatively of our families, particularly our elderly members.
Yeah, thank you too for Dr. Hampton with the word. I was writing some things down that I'm gonna carry with me moving forward. I really appreciate your spirit with what you said, and Dr. Patterson letting us in on the things about COVID that are not always discussed or talked about in the media. Some of us that really do deep dives with patients may hear a little bit about it, but just the minute to minute, moment to moment struggles, and just knowing that you're struggling alone is something that people don't really quite grasp. So really thank you for that testimony, because I think we're going to get a lot out of that. And I think anyone listening with 2 ears should really get a lot out of it. I could not agree more with your sentiments about the vaccine. I think that we have to not always have a hot take about this sort of thing. I love to read, and right over here is Harriet Washington's excellent treatise about entitled Medical Apartheid. And it talks about the history of this country regarding medical mistreatment of Black folk. And it talks about Tuskegee, of course. And, there's a lot of other things that will just have you, that'll make you want to holler. That being said, because of these sorts of things, because of the secretive, sadistic ways that we have been exploited historically, we now know what to shine a light on as far as science is concerned and as far as vaccine development is concerned. And I think that, again, Dr. Hampton, illuminated the racial uprising and the racial really understanding that a lot of those from our white brothers and sisters now understanding what's going on. I think that same thing goes in science. And if you pick up any medical journal worth their salt, they have hit you with study after study and essay after essay about what they need to do, what they have not done in the past, and what they need to do in the future as far as trying to right the wrong historically. I think when it comes to the development of these vaccines, again, to Dr. Patterson's point, the studies are just jaw-dropping as far as how efficacious it is becoming. For example, a flu vaccine is about 60-70% effective every year.
Maybe even less than that.
Yeah, sometimes close to a 50-50 shot. Just kind of depends on year to year. And to get FDA approval for any vaccine, and again, vaccines classically take 8 to 15 years. And to get those FDA approved, that usually has to be a 50-50 shot, about 50-60% efficacious. These two, and now we have two that are coming down the pipe. One from Moderna, which is a small, I don't want to get too down into the weeds, but Moderna is a smaller boutique company, and then there's Pfizer, which is a bigger, company that is a pharmaceutical company, and both of them are showing so far greater than 90% efficacy. That is jaw-dropping, and this is messenger RNA. This is, these are vaccines that they're not just kind of whipping up and saying, hey, it's going to work on some humans and not others. This is cellular level stuff. And again, we know from the genetic code that even though we have melanin, we are all, we all have the same genetic characteristics by and large. So what we should all, as Black folk, be interested in is when they show us who was a part of these trials. I think we're all going to be looking at that. Even the scientists in the room, we're going to want to know what type of folk got this. Were these 20-year-old kids that went to IU and they're white folk, or are they? Is it a multicultural, multi-generational, multi-gender catchment of people? And I think these are the things that we're really going to want to know about. I think the other thing is that those of us that are in my neighbors like this, everybody knows that there's going to be skepticism. I mean, there is not a vaccine that everyone is jumping up and down about. Even the flu vaccine, people are still a little leery about. But again, to Dr. Patterson's point, this is a different scenario. This has turned our whole world upside down. And one thing that we now can be, can really understand with this is that it's going to start with those in need, those that need it first. So it's going to start with those that are the sick and shut-in type, those that are really at high risk, and especially those healthcare providers that are directly in the line of fire. So we're going to be able to see as it's rolled out, because again, we're not going to have enough for everybody quite yet. We're going to start with those that need it absolutely first. So we're going to see how these folks do. And then once it gets to the popular culture, to those at large, the general population of this country, I think we're going to have a good understanding about what's going on with this in the real world. And if it's anything like the study has shown us, I think it will be a big proverbial shot in the arm for turning us around as a people.
Yeah, I think, to your point, I'm sorry, Dr. Hampton, it certainly is understandable, the skepticism that particularly the community would have with reference to, anything that would affect our health moving forward, particularly the things that we've been through in the past. However, there's one thing that you made a very good point about the fact that you didn't want to be on the front lines in terms of getting the vaccine. Well, you won't. We will. They're going to give it to providers first. And that's the one thing you have about it. When you go in and you say to the doctor, well, would you take it? Well, I had to take it because I have to work. So they're going to give it to us first. So if we're still there 3 or 4 weeks afterwards, you should know you're good when you come in.
Well, I'm grateful that we have actual doctors on this call and not just us preachers. I've been hanging out with Dr. Hicks too much because that was the activist. That was the social justice activist speaking. But let me not deter anyone from making practical, sensible, the decision to get the vaccine. And you're absolutely right. It's important that we turn the corner on this, and we have to overcome our skepticism and listen to reason and medicine where applicable. And so I encourage anybody listening, let me clean up what I said. Please go get the vaccine. We need to be healed. And I care deeply for our first responders, and thank you for what you all do. You deserve to be strengthened first and fortified first, because you have to care for the rest of us. And I'll be the second one in line. I won't be the first.
There you go. Okay.
Right. That's perfect. That's perfect. That's perfectly said. So, because we don't want to worsen the disparity. That's the thing. We don't want to, we don't want to turn around in a couple of years and say, boy, remember when we knew that the coronavirus was affecting Black and brown folks more often? And no, it didn't have anything to do with, our actions. It was the fact that we were in the front line. We were in front of this virus way more than anybody else. And we don't want to turn around and a couple of years from now and say, boy, we're still dying from this. Oh boy, let's look and see who's getting the virus, who's getting the, who's getting the vaccine, and it's not us because of the skepticism. So I really appreciate this dialogue, because I think it'll have legs, and I think people will get a lot out of it.
Well, let me dig down a little bit more. I'm not as quick a convert as Dr. David Hampton. There are books out right now that talk about losing weight because of your blood type. There are also theories about DNA, and foods from particular areas that are superfoods because of where you come from, or it could be that, your people come from someplace where a pineapple just kills you and you don't know it. And so if we're looking at blood types being different, if we're looking at DNA being different in terms of weight loss and other physiological issues, then I believe I heard the answer. But I, once again, just want to double down. If there are differences, then certainly we need to make sure we're paying attention to who is testing, who they're providing the vaccine to, because there are physical differences. Even though we are all have the same DNA makeup, there's some physiological differences, just like there are physical differences because of where we've come from. Our nose is wider because we come from Africa. People from Europe, their hair comes down over their ears because it's cold up there. Their noses are narrow because of the cold and moist air. And so there are physiological differences. And so how can we ensure that the tests that have been taken and the efficacy of this vaccine is going to be appropriate for us, where we came from?
Well, I know that at least one, and those are valid concerns. They're very valid concerns. I know that at least one of them, I'm not sure if it was the Pfizer or the Moderna, had 30,000 test subjects. And so
Moderna.
30,000, if you're trying to get something approved from the FDA, they don't look at it in terms of, they look at the type of patient population. So there's going to have to be a spread that is relevant enough that you can get that information and verify that it works for other particular groups. So, African Americans, Asians, Hispanics, they're going to have a percentage of those people in it. And I know for a fact that they had a very large percentage of people who were elderly that they wanted to make sure, because that was a group that they were particularly concerned about. So I think all of the concerns are very valid. The FDA will review them, but you'll have the opportunity to review these things as well. If you want to pull it up online, I'm sure that they're going to put it out there. It's going to be pretty deep, though, so I'm going to say get your reading glasses on and get some coffee, because there's going to be a lot to dive into.
We're going to call you all again.
I'll tell you about it. I'll read it. I will.
Let you exegete that. Good. So look, this is rich discussion. And I thank you all for being here. We are moving into, as my cousin, as William James Hicks said, he said that we're moving into this Thanksgiving season. We're moving into the holiday season as COVID is on an uptick, and even with the hope of a vaccine that is imminent, we still need to do those things that keep our families safe, that keep us safe. And so once again, when it comes to dealing with this holiday, dealing with Thanksgiving that's coming up immediately after we air this show, and as kids are coming home, not just from college, but as kids are coming home from elementary schools and parochial schools, they're coming home to spend time at home. What are the things we need to do in order to keep ourselves physically healthy, in order to keep ourselves mentally healthy, and in order to keep ourselves spiritually strong? And I'll start with BJ, since I said physical first.
All right. Well, I will say I am, like what's been mentioned before, I am mystified at how inept the response has been, as far as giving us the tools as United States citizens to be able to deal with this virus by this time of the year. By this point, we should have had appropriate types of testing and appropriate types of understanding about contact and contact tracing, to where we should have known if that families coming from DC, Indianapolis, Columbus, Atlanta, Nashville, and going to meet somewhere, we should be able to understand where everybody's been and how we've all been tested rapidly, and we have access to testing ourselves. And we just don't have that ability yet. Because of that, and because, Columbus, Franklin County has reached this level 4. There's like 5 levels of severity of COVID, and we're at level 4 now. We've never been level 4 before. My daughter's entire school and my niece's school, they go to the same school. They're now all virtual now. So we're at a point now where it is going to be very difficult outside of either having everybody tested or having everybody strictly quarantined for at least 7 to 10 days before coming together. Outside of these things, and even, and if you're in certain types of jobs where that's an impossibility, where you can't shelter, it's just going to have to be a virtual Thanksgiving outside of your nuclear family, as much as it hurts me to say that. Both sides of my family are just so big on Thanksgiving, but to do it safely, that's the only way to appropriately do it safely. And the things that I've heard from these terrible stories of well-meaning families who, somebody comes in, somebody's doing virtual college, but they're doing it at coffee shops and, all these sorts of things. And, a boyfriend came in town and, I got a new girlfriend, and then now we're introducing it to the parents, and now the parents check on the grandparents. I mean, this is how this happens. This is how people get dangerously hurt, if not worse. So, I hate to sound very doom and gloom, but I feel as a country, holistically, we don't have what it takes right now for the entire country to just have a normal, quote unquote, Thanksgiving, especially because Thanksgiving is such an indoor, intimate, scenario where you can't have a mask eating your macaroni and cheese and your sweet potato pie. You just can't. And it really pains me to say it, but really have to be very, very careful during these next several weeks. There's this thing on social media. I'm sure all of you have seen it. It certainly has made the circles in the medical world, and it's don't sacrifice. Don't have your in-person Thanksgiving and then your ICU Christmas.
That's right. That's right.
And that's about all I can say.
That's right. I mean, I think we need to encourage people to think about Thanksgiving 2021. What do you want Thanksgiving 2021 to look like? Do you want to be able to, do you want to see people in person, or do you want to reminisce about, grandma and grandpa or aunt or uncle who's no longer with us? I mean, just to kind of drive your point home, Dr. Hicks, about, protecting our family. A week before I came down with COVID, I went to see my father, who lives in Kentucky. We went down to see him, and he wanted me to come in the house. Certainly he wanted to embrace me and see how we were doing, and I wouldn't do it. I said, I'm gonna sit outside. We'll sit in the yard. And we were more than 6 feet apart, and he wasn't too happy about it. He was happy to see us, but he wasn't happy about it. I go back home and I come down with it a week later. So I had it. Wow. I had it when I saw him. My father has COPD.
Wow.
So, I was very happy to disappoint him. And I think he was very happy that I chose to disappoint him because I love him just that much that I wasn't willing to put him in that type of situation. So that's what it goes for with the reference to Thanksgiving. I mean, we're going to have to Zoom it up, Zoom or whatever we have to do. But I'm more concerned about 2021, or like you said, Christmas of 2020 than I am worried about Thanksgiving. We've got to keep each other safe. We really do. And we have an opportunity to do it. But that being said, I have to be honest. I don't think that the majority of people are going to do it. I expect to see a spike around Christmas that's unbelievable. I heard a statistic today that said, we're having about 1,000 people a day are dying now. They suspect that by the end of the year, we're going to have the amount of people who are perished in 9/11 dying every single day for a period of time after we have these get-togethers. So, just kind of word of the wise should be sufficient on this. Let's not be more concerned about the moment right ahead of us and be more concerned about what's going to happen down the line.
Yeah, I certainly echo those sentiments. And I think what I'd like to leave the people with is you can be practical and sensible without compromising the spiritual. Let's be sensible and not gather during Thanksgiving so that we can enjoy our Christmas. And if need be, we don't need to gather then either. We're not gathering in our churches to worship, and that is sensible. And you can still be spiritual without, compromising your health. But I think it behooves us to, God wants us to live, right? He wants us to be alive. You have to be alive to serve him. And like Dr. Patterson and anyone who has had COVID, and I just thank God I've had 2 negative COVID tests so far. Anytime I travel, I quarantine and I get a test when I come back. But we have to be very sensible and think about others, not just ourselves, but anyone who has actually contracted COVID. Like Dr. Patterson can tell you, it's no joke. It's nothing to play with. You can die. And those who overcome, thank God for that. Mm-hmm. But there are others who are high risk, and we should not test, as the Bible says. Don't test God. Don't tempt God like that. No. Be smart. Be sensible. Let's not over-spiritualize things. I think we have a tendency to do that. As believers, sometimes we over spiritualize. I had somebody, and I'll close with this. Had somebody ask me a few years ago, Pastor, do you believe that if someone catches the Holy Ghost and hits their head on a pew in church, that they won't get hurt? I said, hell no, I don't believe that. You will be hurt. Let's be real. Let's be practical. Yes, you can hurt yourself. God does work miracles, but let's not test practicality. God also gave us good sense. And yes. I don't want us to over spiritualize thinking, well, God is going to protect me. I won't get COVID. I don't have to wear a mask. I don't have to social distance. Yes, you do. And you should, because it's not only selfish, but it is spiritually wrong to go against the precautions that really God has set up for us to protect us during this time. So I hope I didn't offend anybody, but we have to be real in this day and age. And God honors our faithfulness, and he also honors our being practical as well.
So faith without works is dead, right? We believe that faith strengthens. There are plenty of studies that show the effects of faith and the effects of prayer on the mitigation of physical ailments and dealing with sickness. Certainly, Dr. Patterson has indicated earlier that he seeks to infuse faith into his conversations, specifically and particularly with faithful people, because faith helps in that way. And faith is a muscle. It has to be exercised in order for it to grow stronger. And so during this time, this is causing us to exercise our faith. But once again, faith without works is dead. If I have faith, but I don't put on a mask, or I don't isolate, or I don't pay attention to the science, then that faith is unfounded faith, and it is not matched up in that dialectic relationship with faith and work. And so our encouragement to everyone is to pay attention to the science and pay attention to the spirit, to understand that God perhaps wants to isolate us or separate us during this time, but that's a good time to pray. Life has knocked us all down to our knees, but that's a pretty good praying position. And so let's continue to hold on to our faith and pray, and let's continue to do the things that are necessary for our families to be safe. And as we've said, or as has been said, let's make sure that we're looking to not be sick at Christmas. And we're looking forward to Thanksgiving in 2021. And we're making the practical, pragmatic decisions that allow us and our family to be safe during this time. And so we want to, if there's one word, and maybe this is selfish in my regard, I really want to find out from you guys how the church and how a pastor, how we can show the necessary agility during this time to serve not just our congregations, but this is community impact. We want to make sure that we are serving our community well. How can we do that right now?
I think the things that you said were really important in that. The fact that, your faith is without works, just doesn't work. So this idea of just saying we're going to let God handle it, and we're not going to do the practical things in front of us, just really is not the way to go about it. The faith community can do, I think, a really good job of leading people who are having some mental health issues towards people who can help them. We're not in the process. I don't think you're in the process of really trying to help people with schizophrenia get over schizophrenia without antipsychotics. I hope you're not doing that. If you're not, I'd like to come and have a talk with you about that. But those are people you should refer on, and I'll pray with you. I'll pray for you. I even go with you if that's what we need to have done. But we need that. God has they're physicians for a reason. We're here for a reason. Medications were brought about for a reason, and I think He wants us to have the spiritual community help us help people in the way that we've been gifted to do so.
Our grandfather told me right before I went to Morehouse, and he said it twice, and he never said anything twice to me in my entire life. He stopped me. He said, "Endure a present inconvenience for a future benefit." Mm-hmm. And he said it twice. And if those words don't walk with me so often, and he was, clearly the point was, hey, you want to be a pre-med student, you're starting on a journey towards, bettering yourself academically and seeing where that goes. So here are some words to live by. And that's carried me every step of the way. And if those words don't hit home during COVID-19 in this pandemic, I don't know what will. And I think words like that, coming from First Baptist Church in North Indy, and Pastor Hicks, knowing that everybody is really waiting on the word when you deliver, and those affiliated with the church doing that as well. I think people come to be fed, and when they're fed with that sort of information, if they're armed with that, then they can endure this, even as tough as it will be from now for the next few weeks and few months. I think that the church is really going to be a bedrock for those to endure the present inconvenience.
Was that your grandfather who said that to you?
That was.
Well, your grandfather and my father could hang out, because my father said, he said never make long-term decisions based upon short-term circumstances.
I heard that.
He used to say that over and over and over again. So whenever I was confronted with one of those situations, which are often, it's like, okay, wait a minute. I know this is something I'd like to do right now. How is this going to affect me down the line? And I think it's particularly relevant with what we're talking about in terms of postponing these big celebrations coming up for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Let's look at the long term.
Wonderful. Now, look, I'm going to allow Pastor Hampton to give us the last word, but I do want to follow up on what my grandfather and BJ's grandfather told him, and what Robert Patterson, Dr. Patterson's father, told him. Those were very eloquent ways in which my father said the same thing. When I was a senior, I was senior class president at Morehouse College, and all of my friends had 2 years before moved off campus. But as popular as I was, and the big man on campus that I thought I was, I went to my father and I said, Daddy, everybody else is off campus. Can I please move off campus? And it wasn't quite as eloquent, but this is what my father told me. He said, boy, you can live in hell as long as you know you're going to get out.
Just a little bit longer, just a little bit longer.
So help us, Pastor Hampton.
Well, I'll close with this. Now is the time for us to be like palm trees and not like the oak tree. The palm tree is strong in the toughest of storms because unlike the oak tree is inflexible and it will break. But the palm tree is not only flexible, its roots dig deep into the ground until they wrap around a stone or a rock. And for us in this era of COVID, Christ is our rock, our stone. Just hold on to him. This storm too shall pass. But now is the time to dig deeper into our faith and trust God during these difficult times, and you will overcome. You're a palm tree. You won't break. You'll be blessed.
Fantastic. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we have been blessed by this time of sharing. Thank you all once again for your sacrifice of time, spending time on this evening.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you all for being with us on tonight. I'm going to take an opportunity as pastor to pray. God, we thank you today for the brilliance, the genius of these men. We ask that you might build a hedge around them and their families, continue to allow them to serve as mentors, as sage, wise men that would lead our community and lead us in a plain path. God, we thank you for your guidance and direction. Allow us to hold on to our faith. Keep us. This is our prayer. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray.
We thank you so much for joining, and we pray that you have been blessed by this information. We continue to lift our brothers up as they work to guide our community. And again, our mission is to make our mental health care a normal part of our routine lives. Be safe. I love you all. Have a blessed evening.